Hi guys, welcome back. Let's start another session. And in this tutorial, I'm gonna talk about numbers in Python, working with numbers in Python. And numbers are one of the most common data types in Python and any other languages or Python program. You write, you are actually dealing with numbers at some point, and you are writing different type of initializing different type of variables to store numbers or any kind of numbers, I mean integer, float or whatever. So I want to talk to you guys about the basics of using numbers. We are going to talk about different types of numbers that we can represent in Python, and I also want to show you share some functions that we can use with numbers so we can do a certain mathematical operations. So let's make a new project. For that I don't have to describe how we can do that. You already know it by the time now. First thing first, as it already has default script, I'm gonna delete that. So let's do like this. If I want to write a number in Python, it's really easy. Same like we were writing a sentence in the Python, string in the Python. So let's start this. We already know that there is a print function which can print different kind of things on the screen. So if I just like print 10 and when we run it, you can say that it's just straight away printed number 10 onto the screen. So any number that you want, you can just write inside it and then print it. So for example, if you want to add two numbers, I just want to show you what will happen if you want to add. So you can see that it is already adding the numbers and then it is printing. So if you want to print a decimal number, it is the same. We just have to write that decimal number, and Python is gonna print that decimal number as it is, and it's able to print that decimal number. I can also make numbers negative. So for example, if you want to convert this, make this number negative, I just have to put the minus sign in front of it, and this number will become a negative uh, minus 1.087210. So let's see if it prints, and you can see that it printed the negative number with a minus sign on the screen. So now let's see and do some arithmetic operations on these numbers. Let's start with addition. So Python, if you just write the number and an addition sign, plus sign, and then you can write any number, and let's see, we have already done it, but let's see it again. So Python is able to do the arithmetic operations with just a plus sign and two operands. Those operands, one is the 4 and the other one is the 20. So in the same way, if we are adding a decimal number, we just have to write the decimal number, and it will automatically add the decimal number, integer number to the decimal, or you can say float number. So similarly, we can do the subtraction, we can do the multiplication or division. It's all just you have to replace the sign as you are doing it in other programming languages. So you can see here that Python is very similar, and For example, in our previous lecture, we talked about that we don't have to end the statement with the semicolon. And we could also do the multiplication with the steric sign, and it will do the multiplication. You can say it printed out 84.0. You can pretty much do any kind of operation in Python. And if you want to make more complex mathematical equations, we can also use things to specify order of operations. So as you know, we are using parentheses in our normal mathematics. Similarly, here we can also use parentheses to specify the order of our operations. For example, if we want to add 158 in it, so what Python is going to do, it will first multiply 4.2 with the 20, and then it will add 158 into the resultant. But if you want to specify the order of uh, mathematical operations, then you can use brackets to specify the order. So now what Python will do, it will first add 20 into 158, and then it will multiply it with 152. So let's print it and see what will be the result without bracket and with bracket. So you can see here that these two operations, arithmetic operations, are different with each other. As in the first one, we did not specify the order of the operation, so Python is working on the dbase rule. Uh, so in the second one, we specified the order by putting curly brackets. So it first adds these two operands and then it multiplies it with 4.2. So you can see the use of the parentheses. With the parentheses, we can make complex operations also in Python, complex mathematical operations. So parentheses has a very dominant role in mathematical operations in Python. We can also use one other operation which is called modulus, and you can say it modul that modulates the two operands. It find the modulus. So let's do a modulus operation. For example, if I write 20 modulus 8, so what basically Python do, how we can read it first, it's 20 mod, the sign is mod, and then 8. So the remainder will be, you can see 4. I mean, if we run it, let's run it and then we will see. Yes. So that modulus operator comes a handy quite a bit. We can also see these numbers inside a variable, so we can store them inside the variables in the containers. So let's come over here and we can create, or we can say marks, and we can store a value here 56, and then we can just print out that number by just passing the variable name. So here we assigned a 56 value to the mark variable, that is of type integer, and then we pass that variable to the print statement, so it can just print the mark. You can see here that it printed out the value of the mark. So let's do some other stuff. One of the things which we can do also is that we can convert the number into a string. How we can do it? If we want to convert this number into a string, we can just say, for example, let me write it. We can just say str, and in that we are going to pass the number which we want to convert. So what's gonna happen now is that this number is going to be converted into a string. So when I click the run button, you can see here that it's printed out 56, but instead of number, this is now a string. So this is a really useful function if you want to convert a number into a string. So for example, if you have converted a number into a string, then you can easily concatenate it with another string. Uh, for example, you can write that this marks, okay, let me write from beginning. Ahmad obtained marks in advanced programming. So as in our previous lecture, one of our previous lectures, I told you that we cannot concatenate a string with an number. So if we can convert a number into a string, then we can concatenate it with another string. So here you can see that I have written a string, then I concatenate it. Oh, I forgot to put the plus sign. I concatenated it with a mark, but that mark is actually a string now because I have converted it into a string using the str function, and then I concatenate it with another string. So let's run it and see if we can. So you can see I'm about 1056. I forgot to put this here in advanced program. But for example, if we don't convert it, if I just write the mark, now this is a number and it cannot be converted into a string. You can see here that there is a type error. Can only concatenate string, not integer to string. So this is why string functions are sometimes important. You can convert the integer to a string and then you can use it, you can concatenate it with other strings. So anytime you want to print a number next to a string, you got to make sure that you're gonna make sure that it is converted into a string before you concatenate it with another string. So there's a bunch of other stuff that we can do with, and a lot of times you are gonna want to be using specific math, like more advanced math operator. So there is bunch of different math functions that we can use, and the function is basically just like a little collection of code that does a certain type of operations, and those can be any mathematical operations on the number. So I'm gonna show you guys some most of the popular functions that we will be using in Python related to numbers. The first one is called ABS, and it is called the absolute value. So using this function we can get the absolute value of the number. So there is another function which is the POW, pow function, and this actually requires two type of information from us. The first is going to be a number, and the second is going to be the power that I want to take that number to. So I can say like 5 comma 2. So what actually it is actually, you can say that it is actually 5 5 to the power 2. So let's print this output. But actually, did I make a mistake here or not? Okay. So let's print out this and see what's the output. You can see here that it takes the output of 5 to the power 2. So this power function is really useful for taking numbers to specific powers. Uh, so in addition to using this power function, we can also use another function which is called max. So we can say max here, and it will actually return the largest number among these two. It also requires true parameters from us. And so right now to this max function I gave 5 and 2. So it's just pulling out 5 if we run it, when we run it I mean. So let's run it, and you can see here that it printed out 5, which is the highest number among these two bigger numbers. You can change it to see what it will do more. So now you can see that among these two numbers, 5 and 12, it printed out 12 because it's this max function is finding actually the bigger number among these numbers. So 12 is the biggest one, and it printed out 12. Similarly, we can also use the min function, which will do the opposite of the max function, and this is going to print out the minimum number among these two, and the minimum is the 5. So let's see if it prints out the 5. Yes, it printed out the 5. So these are the one of the a few of the most famous and popular operations, arithmetic operations, that you don't have to write the code obviously, but for example if you want to write the code to find the min and max, then you have to write a function for that or a block of code for that. You can use if statement and uh, other conditional statements. You can use it to find the min or max, or you can do some other arithmetic operations to convert the value to an absolute value. Or if you want to do the power operation, then you have to do the multiplications many times. But if you use these functions, power function, min max function, apps function, it can do it can ease the work for you, and you just have to pass the parameters. So these are functions already built in Python, and the most good thing about Python is that you don't, in most of the functions, common functions, you don't have to import any library. For example, in Java you are, or in C++ you are importing the IOStream libraries. Okay, but here you don't have to import any library. You are just printing easily without importing any library. So this is why Python is much easy and simpler language than other languages. So another function is the round function. Let me just write print. So you can see here that it just requires one parameter, one piece of information from us. So if we pass, for example, 6.4, to it, and let's run it. So you can see here that it's rounded off 6.4 to 6. But if for example I write 6.6, so what it will do, it will round out to the 7. So you can see here that it printed out the 7. So this round function is actually rounding to the nearest integer. So there are a few other functions that I want to show you guys, but in order to get access to them, I'm actually going, in order to access those functions, I mean we have to import uh, external code. And in Python, if we want to, for example in C, we are actually importing libraries. Similarly in Python, if we want to import some external uh, code, we have to import some files. So if I want to access these specific math functions, I have to import something called Python math. So in Python, if you want to import, you can just write from math and import star. So basically what it is going to do, it is going to go out to math functions, and it will grab all of the functions which are inside that math file. So I already showed you guys a few of these math functions, but there is actually a bunch more. And in order to access them, we're going to need to include this line of code inside of our file. This line of code from math import static. Static means it will import all the functions of that. So once we have that, now we can access a few other also. So there is another function which is called floor, uh, and it is also a method. So there is another function which is the floor, FLLOR. So what it basically does, it grabs the lowest number. So it's essentially just going to chop off this decimal point. For example, if we write 3.8, okay, and then so you don't have to write, I mean import the libraries in the top of the file, but you can import it anywhere in the code, but before using that library. So this floor function is actually from the math file. So we have to import the math file libraries, and then we can use this function. So let's run it and see what will happen. So it drop off the decimal point values from this number. So it just printed out the 3. And similarly there is another which is the seal function. So it will do exactly the opposite of the floor. So it will just round the number up, I mean, and it will let me delete all this so that you don't get confused. So it will just print out 4 now. What mistake I did? Oh, oops, why I don't see? Where am I? Okay, so this is the seal. I wrote the wrong spelling, another seal. Anyhow, so it rounded off to the upper bound. So no matter what, we will always get 4. For example, if I put 3.2 in that, and then even then it will print out the 4, because it, no matter is it either below to 3.4 3.5 or it is more than 3.5, it will always round to the seal. So the seal is 4 and obviously the floor is 3, so that's why it is now printing 4 because of the seal function. There is another function which is called square root, and it is represented with sqrt. So you can see here that it takes two arguments, and obviously it will return the square root of the function. For example, if we write 25, so it has to return 5. So you can see here that it returned 5.0. Similarly, if you put, for example, unknown, okay, so it returned out 7.7 and rest of the value. So those are some of the very interesting functions. Sorry. And inside of these math modules, actually in Python we call it module. Some people say module also, but you don't have to worry much about it, what the modules are right now. Just know that when we put this line of code into our program, it will give access to a lot of math functions, and we can do a lot of more mathematical operations inside our program, and we can use those functions. If you want, you can just you can explore this library by going to by googling it, and you can google it and see what are the most interesting mathematical operations functions that this math module is having, and you can implement those, use those. Here I showed you guys a very few of the mathematical operations functions here, and I would say the ones that we looked at here are probably the most commonly used, but there are a bunch more, I mean, tons of documentations online about this stuff. You can just look online about the math functions in Python, and you can see tons like list of these things. If you have any questions about this tutorial, you can ask me anytime via email or by message. So I hope you have now little knowledge about Python and how you can play with strings, different type of data types, integers, how you can print it, how you can do the string operations and integer operations on some, I mean, integer or string variables. So see you guys in next tutorial. Thank you. Take care.